Hey all, you know what they say, another patch review. 6.4 went live last week, and with it came the continuation of the post-Endwalker MSQ and the conclusion of the Pandemonium raid story. If you've watched my patch reviews before, you already know the drill. We'll do some general spoiler-free discussion, and then I'll get into the meat of things in the spoiler section. So, let's not waste any more time and get right into it. You know, every time a new patch comes out, there's this little tiny part of me that thinks maybe this will be the one. The not good one. And I'm not really sure why I think that, because with every patch that comes out, I'm reminded that 14's theme just doesn't miss with the patches. 6.4 is no exception. Ishikawa and the writing team continue their streak of putting out banger MSQ while the battle team continues to craft these fantastic fights. You know, while I'm handing out praise, whoever was involved in designing the Ether font went absolutely insane with the visuals and presentation. I can't really show it off yet, you know, spoilers and all. But man, I just want to explore every nook and cranny of that dungeon, especially the places you can only see in the distance. Oh, and yeah, the raids also looked really cool as well. We ended up with some crazy looking bosses in this tier. We had some freaky guys, a cool guy, and even an entirely unexpected but neat looking guy. You know, guy being the optimal nondescript spoiler-free term, of course. While the current MSQ story arc didn't wrap up like I'd assumed it would, the development in Zero's character, progression of the plot, and continued world building left me feeling more than satisfied with what we got. I was pleasantly surprised as well when the MSQ randomly just turned into a Hildebrand quest for a couple minutes. Usually leaning that far into comedy unexpectedly can have a negative effect on an otherwise serious story, but you know, the scenario team already has that on lock, so nothing to worry about. On the other hand, Pandemonium wasn't quite as strong in the writing department this time around. It's difficult to really get into why the story didn't quite hit as well as it did in the previous two tiers, but let's just say it's entirely rooted in the extreme change in setting at the end of 6.2's tier. While the raid's plot didn't exactly end on the peak it could have, there was an insane bit of lore introduced that fleshes out a random item only referenced in a single line of dialogue from A Realm Reborn and the lyrics of a boss track. You know, this isn't advanced world building anymore. We're getting into next level extreme super world building. Oh yeah, and the actual encounters for the raid, those were pretty sweet too, except for P10. That was just okay. Alright, if you're hearing this, you've reached the Great Spoiler Divide, also known as my warning for you if you haven't played through 6.4's MSQ and raid content. We're getting into spoilers now. If you'd like to avoid those, then just save this video into your watch later, and you can always come back when you're done playing that content. Alright, we good? Okay, cool. Can we just talk about how crazy the twist that learning Golbez actually died during the Contra Memoria was? It was crazy enough when they revealed Zero had already met Golbez and Durant during the Flood, or before the Flood, but that was just mind-boggling. It also really adds some sweet context to Golbez's actions. This man isn't just some crazy guy who thinks he's doing the right thing. He's a fallen hero who's just trying to save the world his friend died trying to protect. Look, I'll admit I'm a sucker for tragic villains, but the hero finally lives long enough to become the villain, it's just so good. Right, but I'm kind of jumping the gun here. Let's backtrack a bit, and I'll try and cover things in order. Starting with the MSQ, I felt the writing team set out to do three things with this patch. First was to further develop Zero's character and continue her growth. I'd argue that this is their main focus, even a little bit more than the main story, but that's not to say they sidelined the story, just that, you know, each section of the patch was kind of designed to build up her character to this eventual confrontation with Golbez at the end of the patch and, you know, have a nice show of development. You know, since her introduction, Zero's arc has been reconciling with the sudden introduction of a world where she isn't fighting for her existence day in and day out, as well as the realization that, you know, there are people who care for her with no ulterior motives or weird expectations. So in short, she has trust issues and has been slowly working on them. Through interactions with Urianger, Thancred, and Euless, she steadily comes to understand what it means to trust in others, and slowly starts to break free from her transactional view of the world. It's super well written, it's really good, there's a lot of animation used for nonverbal communication, and it's a super cool, slow burn development. I had this 5-minute character analysis kind of drafted up for this video, but you know, I decided that this is supposed to be a review, and yeah, it wasn't really the best time. Look, the point is, they've been spending a lot of time on this character progression, and it shows. A+ work. Alright, the second thing they focused on in this patch was keeping up with the changed world. World building is important, yeah, I don't really need to get into that here. It's a fairly straightforward writing principle. As we're all aware, the events of Endwalker kind of messed with a lot of places on Aetheris, Garlemald more than most. During our visit to Garlemald to try and secure the Tower of Babel so that we can, like, shoot energy and stuff, we get an opportunity to hear what the remaining Garlean community thinks of the current Eorzean occupation. Needless to say, they are not fans and really want us out. While this poses a bit of an inconvenience to us in terms of, like, the MSQ, it is super important that the Garlands have this resentful apprehension, at least from a writing standpoint. This keeps the world feeling real. You know, a massive upheaval in people's lives would foster a great deal of negativity. It's really good attention to detail and continues the trend of writing, you know, just a generally super realistic world. We also get some, like, minor Sharlayan updates, but that's, like, mostly a Pandemonium thing with the whole Ethereal Sea. Look, I get it, Fortuno. I'll get to it. The third thing was to set up for 7.0 story. Usually patch X.4 would be, like, leading into the next expansion's MSQ, you know, finally culminating in this big finale in patch X.5. This time around, they don't seem to be doing that. Breaking from the norm, we didn't actually defeat Golbez in this patch, and instead got presented with an even bigger final boss, Zeromius, you know, the final boss of FF4. Not a really big surprise on that one, but he's here. Now, I really don't think that's going to be the plot for 7.0. More than likely, next patch, Y'shtola will pull off some insane galaxy brain maneuver and finalize her inter-reflection travel and get us a sick doorway to the first, and also its abundance of light. In reality, I think our plot hook is actually this letter on Kryle's desk. From a brief exchange we get between Urianger and Thancred, they appear to be, like, they've both been approached by some mysterious prospective employer who's looking for Archons to help with a project. My guess is that the letter Kryle has is probably from the same individual, and whatever job they have for the Archons will have a big, like, central role in 7.0's story. Additionally, we run into Ehrenfell when we go to see Kryle. You know, at this point, we've seen him so much, and he's been in the story for so long, I really wouldn't be surprised if he just turns into a main cast member soon. Which is why his comments about heading back to his homeland seem especially important. My pet theory at the moment is one of two things. Either A, we're going to his homeland in 7.0, or B, they're cutting him from the story. I'm really hoping that it's A, because B would suck. Alright, and one last final thing before we get into Pandemonium. Stop trying to make Xenos out to be our friend. He's cringe, poorly written, and generally not even remotely as interesting as they pretend he is. So stop that. Don't. Like I said in the non-spoiler section, I didn't feel like Pandemonium's writing really nailed the ending this time around. This was fundamentally kind of rooted in that decision to bring the finale from the past into the contemporary timeline. As you already know, our three supporting cast members for the raid have long since died off, one of them quite recently. We totally didn't have anything to do with that. So we're in this position with, like, how are we supposed to deal with Pandemonium suddenly just showing up? Well, let me tell you, by revealing that Athena is actually back somehow, and then she creates memory clones of Eric, Breadman, and Themis. Look, I get what they were trying to do with this, but it just doesn't feel the same as if it was the actual characters. Something about knowing that the characters we're working with aren't real and just memory constructs made it really hard to get fully invested in the story. This was even more difficult when we end up, like, going back to the past at the end and meeting up with the real versions of the characters, because, like, we just had this, like, climactic epic confrontation that was, like, the fate of the world and, like, thousands of years of, like, build up for the characters, and they don't know any of that happened because we just did that with a bunch of, like, fake people. It just doesn't feel as solid as it could. I also wasn't super down with how they executed the Reborn Athena's plan. Like, how did she know to put her memory in the Heart of Sabik? Like, what made her think that that was the right play? I mean, if the Warrior of Light had never existed, the rejoining would have just, like, been completed, and La Habrea would have still had the Aura Sight. I just can't believe that she would have accounted for the fucking sundering in her master plan. The iffy plot aside, the lore we got on Orosite was super cool. I never in a million years would have been able to guess that we would be getting Heart of Sabik lore 10 years after it was introduced in A Realm Reborn. I mean, it was mentioned once in actual dialogue. The revelation that Black Orosite actually corrupts those who come into contact with it was like super interesting too. I might be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure it was mentioned that the Ascians used like dark crystals to reform after dying. Because like if we take the newly established lore into account, they might have actually been using Black Orosite to facilitate the reconstitution process. And if that's true, it would explain how both Emmett and La Habrea, characters we've seen to be very collected and rational people, how they could just go off the deep end and kind of go nuts post-sundering. Their desires to reclaim their lost world was made into an all-consuming fervor by the corruption of the Orosite. Though, it's kind of just speculation at this point, but it'd be really cool if it was true. And I think that just about covers things. MSQ was very good, Raid not quite as much, all the fights were good except P10, and this guy is really funny looking. And this is probably a good time to sign off then. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to see more content from me, then consider subscribing and ringing that bell to be informed when another video of mine comes out. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.